The Coffin was more than just a bar. Its dark wood and heavy curtains offered a sanctuary for Dreadford's night dwellers. The jazz music that played softly in the background seemed almost to echo through the dimly lit room, underscoring the conversations between the few patrons who were gathered there. In a quiet corner of the bar, seated at a round table, were two figures. Obadiah, his sharp features barely visible in the shadows, watched the crowd with a patient gaze. Across from him sat Tom Bridges, whose size seemed to dwarf the small chair he was seated on. The large vampire leaned forward.
I love them, you know. My wife, my son. The hardest part was walking away knowing I wouldn't grow old with them.
Obadiah nodded, understanding all too well.
You made your choice. Now you need to move on, Tom. There's no going back once you've left the light.
Tom's massive shoulders shifted, as though the weight of his past clung to him still. But before he could reply, a shadow fell over their table.
Mind if we join you?
Virginia's voice cut through the quiet conversation. She stood with Isabella beside her, holding glasses of what appeared to be red wine. But Tom knew better. It wasn't wine. Virginia was tall, with an air of authority, her features obscured by the dim light. To the casual observer, she appeared as a statuesque woman of power and beauty, yet in reality, she was an Orlok, just like Tom. Isabella, on the other hand, was still wide-eyed and fresh to this new world. She sat close to Obadiah, her dark hair falling across her face as she observed the scene around her. Tom's gaze moved to the younger vampire, and he raised an eyebrow.
Is this the girl you've taken under your wing?
He asked, his voice gruff but with a hint of curiosity. Obadiah smiled faintly.
Isabella. She's still learning, but she'll find her place.
Virginia slipped into the chair next to Tom, her eyes studying him carefully. For a moment there was silence between them, the air heavy with unspoken tension. Tom, despite his monstrous size and appearance, had a knack for breaking through walls, both literal and figurative.
So, Virginia, you don't strike me as the kind to hang around small talk. What brings you to the table?
She shot him a glance, eyes narrowing slightly. She handed Obadiah and Tom each a glass full of the red beverage and took a sip from her own glass.
Small talk isn't my style, but you seem to enjoy it. Surprising for someone your size.
Tom chuckled softly.
Looks can be deceiving.
Is that so? I've heard about you, Tom Bridges. A gentle giant, they say. Hard times ahead for you. Nothing about being a Nosferatu is gentle.
He tilted his head slightly, as if considering her words, but then he smiled. A crooked but somehow charming smile.
I know how to be rough, when the situation demands.
Her eyes lingered on his crooked smile for a moment longer than necessary. She then turned to her glass and took a sip, and without looking at him, with a faint smile at the corner of her mouth, she said softly,
I'd like to see that sometime.
Obadiah cleared his throat, cutting through the tension, and turned to Tom.
Speaking of introductions, I've been meaning to ask, since Daniel's departure, the Midnight Fiends have an open spot, right? Isabella here is still learning the ropes, and I'm sure you wouldn't mind having someone from House Leviathan to watch your back. What do you say?
Tom leaned back in his chair, finally breaking eye contact with Virginia, and gave Isabella a cocky glance. She fidgeted slightly under his gaze but held her ground.
Is she ready for what's out there?
She'll learn, but she needs a crew.
Obadiah nodded. After a moment of consideration, Tom exhaled through his nose and said,
It's fine by me, especially coming with your recommendation. But it's not just my call. I'll bring her with me to meet up with the others, see what they think.
I appreciate that.
Tom offered a small, reassuring smile.
Might be good for us to have someone from House Leviathan. Opens up new opportunities for everyone.
I won't be a burden. I'll earn my place.
Isabella spoke.
Good. We'll see what you've got soon enough.
Tom nodded approvingly. The heavy wooden doors of Oliver's mansion creaked open, revealing a grand room bathed in the soft glow of chandelier light. The room was elegant, furnished with velvet drapes that framed the large oval table at the center. Around it sat the Midnight Fiends, the group Obadiah had spoken about to her: Oliver, Pamela, Julio, and Tom. Now, Isabella was here, stepping into a world she was still learning to navigate. She shifted nervously, feeling the weight of their gazes as she followed Tom to the table.
We've got a new face, guys. Isabella here is Obadiah's girl, and he's looking for her to join a crew. She's still new, but she's ready to learn. The question is, are you guys good with her joining the Fiends?
Oliver leaned back in his chair, his sharp eyes locking onto Isabella.
Obadiah vouched for you, and we could use another member. But I need to hear your story. What brought you to us?
Isabella swallowed, a hard habit to let go now that she was dead. She didn't like being the center of attention, but this was necessary. She stood a little straighter, gathering her thoughts.
I was a cook. I opened a small restaurant near the docks. Nothing special, really. I didn't know about any of this. I didn't even know vampires existed.
She gestured vaguely to the room, encompassing not just the Fiends but the entire underworld she now found herself in, as they listened intently.
One night, I was walking home late and I ran into some trouble. A guy from the docks, someone who worked on the ships, started following me. He wouldn't leave me alone, and I didn't know what to do. That's when Obadiah appeared. He scared the guy away. I thought he was just another stranger passing by, but there was something different about him. He seemed otherworldly.
She smiled faintly, remembering that first encounter, and her voice softened as she spoke of Obadiah.
We kept running into each other after that. At first it felt like fate, but then I realized it was more. We were falling in love. We started dating. One night he told me the truth about the city, about vampires, the danger, and the opportunities.
Her eyes flickered to the others, gauging their reactions. Isabella paused for a moment, feeling the weight of what she was about to admit.
He told me that for us to be together, really together, I had to become one of you. And I accepted. I knew the life I was living wasn't enough. I wanted more. So I chose this.
A moment of silence followed her words, as the Fiends took it in. Isabella's eyes darted between them, trying to read their expressions.
We'll take it to a vote.
He turned first to Tom.
You brought her here. What's yours?
I've seen enough to know she's serious. She deserves a chance.
Pamela was next. She tilted her head, her sharp eyes never leaving Isabella's.
She's green, but something tells me she's got guts. I know a fighter when I see one.
Julio tapped his chin, his eyes narrowing as he inspected Isabella.
She'll need training, but the potential's there.
Finally, Oliver looked at Isabella again, his mind running some type of risk assessment analysis.
Nay. She seems too eager. Even impulsive. I don't like that. If she turned for love and excitement, her fire can burn the candle very quick.
Pamela and Tom erupted in protest, making Julio calmly lower his head with a smile, shaking it at how predictable his friends were. Isabella felt the room become very small, a disappointed look on her face. Oliver let his friends vent their frustration as his words hung in the air like a thick smoke. Finally, he raised his hand, asking for silence.
Since the vote must be unanimous, and it's not, you're in but on probation. Until you prove yourself, nothing is guaranteed. Understood?
Pamela crossed her arms, clearly unsatisfied with the deliberate suspense. Tom opened his mouth to say something, but closed it immediately. He understood now what his friend was doing. Julio continued to smile in silence, because he understood Oliver's angle from the start. He would give her a chance, but had a backup plan in case the Leviathan was too passionate. The businessman was clearly shaping up to be a good leader in Daniel's stead. Isabella, in her turn, nodded with relief washing over her.
Understood.
Oliver's expression softened just a little, but his voice took on a more serious tone as he continued.
Now that that's settled, there's something else.
He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table, his gaze shifting to each member of the Fiends in turn.
Duchess Caroline of House Leviathan has reached out. We've got a situation. There's a circus in town, the Eternal Reverie. People are missing around there, leaving many to believe that there is a host of vampires there, and if it is true, They didn't announce themselves to the court, neither asked for permission to stay.
Pamela's eyes narrowed.
How many are missing?
Started with 2 disappearances, but the numbers have grown.
Julio leaned forward.
They've overstayed their welcome. What does the Duchess want us to do?
She wants proof. If they're breaking the laws of Dreadford, we must find out and deal with them.
Pamela cracked her knuckles, a predatory smile crossing her lips.
Sounds like a show to me.
After the meeting concluded, Pamela approached Julio on the way outside.
Julio, we need to talk.
What about?
Pamela motioned toward a quieter corner, away from the others. When they were alone, Pamela turned to face him, her voice lowering.
It's about Daniel.
We've already dealt with that. Daniel was expelled for a good reason, Pamela. You know that.
I'm not so sure. I spoke with him after what happened.
What are you talking about?
Pamela took a second, glancing to the side as if considering how to phrase her next words.
Daniel told me something strange. He said he feels this overwhelming compulsion to please DuPont, like something is controlling him.
For a moment, neither of them spoke. The air between them seemed to thicken. Julio's brow furrowed deeply as he digested her words.
I don't know for sure. But Daniel's not acting like himself. I saw it with my own eyes. Maybe we didn't help him by casting him out. Maybe there's more to this.
Julio ran a hand through his dark hair, the gears in his mind visibly turning.
Look, Daniel screwed up. But if there's any chance he's being manipulated, then we need to do something. We can't just leave him out there. Vulnerable.
Julio sighed, his expression softening just a fraction.
I will look into it, Pamela. Quietly. We can't afford distractions right now.
Pamela nodded, though the tension in her face didn't ease.
I get it. But don't wait too long, Julio. Something's off, and we might be too late if we don't act soon.
I won't wait, but we handle this carefully. No one else can know until we have more information.
Pamela gave him a grateful look before stepping back, her shoulders still tense.
Thanks, Julio.
The Midnight Fiends made their way by car to the outskirts of the city. Ahead, the faint silhouette of the Eternal Reverie Circus came into view, its once dazzling allure now twisted into something ominous under the pale light of the moon. They parked and approached the circus by foot. The lights that remained flickered weakly, casting distorted shadows that danced across the desolate grounds. A heavy silence hung in the air, broken only by the faint rustle of wind through the trees and the distant hum of the city far behind them. Oliver was the first to step forward, his calm demeanor masking the tension in the air.
Keep your guard up. We don't know what we're walking into,
he warned in a low voice.
It's been abandoned for some time, but something's still here.
Julio agreed. Tom Bridges, towering over the others, adjusted his hat and shifted his massive frame as quietly as he could, keeping a protective eye on Isabella. The newest member of their group was visibly nervous, though she masked it well, her wide eyes flicking to the shadows, as if expecting something to jump out at any moment. The fiends moved closer, their steps measured and cautious. The circus grounds were deserted. As they walked, they passed by attractions that had clearly seen better days, weathered signs advertising grotesque spectacles. A twisted carousel stood still, its once vibrant horses now cracked and lifeless, their faces frozen in eerie, silent screams. Nearby, a broken Ferris wheel creaked ominously as it swayed slightly in the wind, its skeletal frame looming over the darkened fairgrounds like a forgotten relic. Julio's eyes locked onto the largest structure in the center of the circus, a massive crimson tent, its deep red fabric glowing faintly under the moonlight. It towered over everything else, its sheer size making it seem like a slumbering beast, waiting to awaken.
That is the main attraction,
he whispered. Pamela frowned, her eyes narrowing as she surveyed the scene. A scent of fresh blood captured her senses. With a look at each of his companions, she confirmed that they could also feel it.
Let's keep moving. We need to find where this is coming from,
Oliver said. The scent of blood grew stronger as Pamela led them to the source, venturing deeper into the grounds. It led them toward the edge of the circus, where a dilapidated haunted house attraction stood. The entrance, once adorned with gaudy lights, was now dark and foreboding. A sign that read, "Terrors of the Abyss," creaked in the wind.
Perfect. Just what we needed.
Pamela muttered sarcastically. Oliver stepped forward, his hand brushing against the door.
We'll go in through the back. No sense walking into a trap.
Tom took point and led the way around the side of the haunted house, moving quietly. The rest followed, their senses heightened. They found the back entrance, a small, nearly hidden door. Oliver motioned for Tom to open it. With a grunt, Tom twisted the handle and pushed it open with ease. The door creaked loudly, revealing a narrow, dimly lit corridor. The stench of rot and decay hit them immediately, the air inside thick and oppressive.
Well, this is inviting.
Pamela wrinkled her nose. One by one, they slipped inside, the darkness swallowing them as they entered the haunted house. The eerie silence that greeted them only heightened the sense of dread. As they moved through the narrow hallways, the fiend's eyes darted to every shadow, every flicker of movement. The air was thick with the scent of old wood and mildew, but beneath it all was the unmistakable coppery tang of fresh blood. Isabella, despite her nerves, kept close to Tom. Her vampiric instincts were on edge, and she felt a chill run down her spine as she caught the faintest hint of whispering, like voices coming from deep within the house.
Something's here. I can feel it.
Isabella's voice was barely a whisper. Tom's eyes flicked to Pamela, who was now crouched near the floor studying something.
Blood.
She said quietly, pointing to a small dried smear on the ground.
Not old either. Something or someone was dragged through here.
Whatever's inside this place, it's been feeding recently.
Oliver said. A deep silence fell over the group as they exchanged wary glances. The haunted house was no longer just a decaying attraction. It was a hunting ground, and the Midnight Fiends had just stepped into its jaws. Tom bent down to examine the blood smear.
What's the next step? Do we look for fingerprints?
He muttered, glancing at Pamela, but she crossed her arms, frowning.
Daniel was the one who knew how to do that. This would be a hell of a lot easier if he was here.
Julio's face tightened with irritation, and Oliver picked up on that.
Daniel always knew how to piece these things together. We're walking into something blind here, and we might be missing clues.
Pamela continued, her frustration bubbling up.
There's no time to dwell on the past. We've got to make do without him.
Just as Oliver finished speaking, a deep, monstrous sound echoed through the halls. It was low, guttural, and unmistakably inhuman. The fiend's eyes snapped to the source of the noise further inside the building.
Let's move,
Oliver said. The command was clear, but the tension was palpable. They advanced down a narrow corridor, stepping over broken animatronics that littered the floor. The mechanical figures, once meant to entertain, were now frozen in grotesque, unnatural poses. A clown with a broken jaw hung limply from a swing. A grinning skeleton with glowing eyes twitched slightly as they passed. An animatronic vampire with a pointed cape and fanged smile seemed to mock them as they walked by. The flickering lights overhead made shadows dance eerily along the walls, and every step seemed to drag them deeper into a nightmare.
Everything about this place. It's staged to hide something or to confuse.
Isabella whispered. They soon came upon a large open room, a central attraction. A rope bridge stretched across a dark, stagnant pool of water. Cages lined the walls, their bars rusted and bent. Most of the cages were empty, their doors hanging open, but one in particular caught their attention. A large sign above the cage read, Dagon, the monstrous creature of the Blood Lagoon. Inside the cage, a horrifying creature crouched over a severed human arm, munching at it with sharp, jagged teeth. Its body was grotesque, part man and part fish, with black slick scales that glistened under the dim light. Its limbs were unnaturally long, tipped with webbed, clawed hands, and its black eyes blinked slowly, filled with malice. Pamela's eyes widened in recognition.
That's a Dagon, an anathema. I've heard of these. They're created from vampires, stripped of their humanity by some kind of ancient curse from the tower. They're more Nephilim than anything else.
The fiends exchanged uneasy glances. This was far worse than they had anticipated. An anathema meant dark, forbidden magic, and likely deeper ties to the tower than they had realized.
We need to capture it. This is the proof we need.
Oliver said firmly. Tom stepped forward, drawing a stake from beneath his coat.
I'll handle it.
The others stayed back as Tom approached the cage cautiously, the Dagon's eyes tracking his every move. For a moment it stayed still, watching, its body hunched over like a predator waiting for the right moment to strike. Without warning, The Dagon lunged at the cage's bars with terrifying speed, its claws scraping against the metal. The bars buckled under the pressure, and before anyone could react, the creature had broken free, hurtling toward Tom with feral aggression. Tom barely had time to raise his arms in defense before the Dagon struck, its powerful limbs knocking him back with a force that sent him crashing into a nearby wall. The room erupted into chaos as the creature screeched, its voice a twisted, guttural roar that echoed through the haunted house.
A Dagon isn't just any monster. It is made from vampires of House Leviathan. Don't underestimate its strength.
You could have said this before.
The creature moved with unnatural speed, its webbed hands clawing through the air as it attacked. It slashed at Julio, who barely managed to dodge out of the way. He retaliated with his fire magic, but the monster jumped into the water, dodging his fire wave, then jumping back outside. The dark water followed the creature, spreading around the ground of the room, making the terrain slippery and treacherous. Oliver fired his shotgun, but the Dagon was too fast, dodging to the side with a snarl. Isabella darted in, her speed almost matching the creature's, but the Dagon was relentless, forcing her to back off with a series of vicious swipes. Tom, shaking off the impact, got to his feet and charged again, his overcoat billowing as he swung the stake toward the Dagon. It deflected the blow with a quick movement of its claws, knocking Tom aside once more, making him drop the stake.
The damn thing's strong.
Tom growled. Pamela circled around, trying to find an opening.
We need to bring it down now.
She warned before lunging against the monster. The creature dodged the movement of the woman and responded by biting her deeply. Isabella's eyes flicked to the stake on the floor. She knew its purpose because Obadiah had taught her well. In a flash, amid the chaos of the struggle, she dove for it with a burst of speed. With the stake in hands, she aimed at the creature's heart. She felt the scales resisting her attack, and the creature tried holding her arm to stop her from pushing the stake further. The Dagon's claws wounded her wrists, but Isabella called on the power of her vampiric blood and felt it burning inside her. The creature screeched, its body convulsing as the stake pierced its heart. For a moment, it flailed, trying to resist, but the damage had been done. The Dagon let out one last blood-curdling scream before collapsing to the ground, its body twitching violently before finally going still. The room fell into a tense silence as Tom put the creature on his shoulders, their unnecessary breaths heavy, their faces marked with relief and unease.
We need to get out of here. We need to expose whatever this circus is to the council.
Julio said, his voice strained as his eyes scanned the dark corners of the room. Oliver nodded, his eyes still fixed on the Dagon's staked form.
Everyone all right?
All eyes turned to Isabella. She cast a glance at the creature she had defeated. The Dagon's languid form limp on Tom's shoulder, kept inert by the stake piercing his heart. She felt a pain on her wrists, and for the first time she noticed she was very thirsty.
I think I need a little blood. I am feeling weak, but nothing I can't handle.
You did a great job.
As the Midnight Fiends moved swiftly away from the circus, their nerves were on edge, their minds still processing the battle they just survived. The chilling memory of the Dagon's screech lingered in the back of their thoughts as they reached the clearing where they parked.
Let's just get out of here before something else comes for us.
But before they could reach the car, there was a sudden violent screech of metal. Their car was wrenched upwards by an invisible force, crushed like paper in mid-air. It twisted, groaned, and fell to the ground in a heap of wreckage.
What the hell?
Oliver muttered, eyes wide as he scanned the surroundings. A slow, mocking clap echoed through the night, followed by the shuffle of footsteps. Emerging from the shadows near another car were 5 figures, each clad in grotesque costumes and Halloween masks. The Midnight Fiends stood in cold awe as they recognized their old enemies.
Look what we've got here.
Wade's voice rumbled through his mask.
Surprised to see us? Thought you sent us away for good? Guess we're harder to kill than you thought.
Javier laughed darkly, his voice laced with venomous glee. Julio clenched his fists, his muscles tensing with anger.
We put you in prison. You should be rotting there.
Should, being the key word.
Stephanie agreed, her voice dripping with mockery.
But we found a way out, got ourselves a new gig, and a new friend.
Her gaze shifted toward a 5th new companion. Stepping forward, the cloaked figure tilted her head, her mask resembling a twisted, lifeless doll's face.
Name's the Sculptress. Pleased to finally meet you all, Midnight Fiends. I've heard so much about you.
She said, her voice soft but filled with menace. Oliver took a step forward.
You were 4 before. Now you're 5. Who's desperate enough to team up with you freaks?
You'll find out soon enough.
Javier chuckled. The tension was thick in the air, the fiends on one side, their foes on the other, both groups staring each other down, waiting for the first move. The speed demon took a step forward.
Are you ready for round 2? 'Cause we've been waiting for this rematch. Soon enough, the city will know that the Midnight Fiends were destroyed by the Carrion Eaters.